Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Michael Rogers. I'm the moderator for Go Ahead and Ask. That's our monthly First Presbyterian Church of Farmington Hills video Q&A with our interim pastor, Bruce Mulder.
Hi, Michael.
Good to have you back again.
Good to be here.
So in each program, Pastor Bruce tackles answers to questions, tough questions that we try to come up with. Also easy questions, off-the-wall questions, all kinds of questions that people might have about the Presbyterian faith and Christianity in general. You can find past shows by going to our First Presbyterian Church of Farmington website and clicking on Watch on Demand videos, or by navigating to our YouTube page. You can submit questions to our YouTube page, or hand them to Bruce or myself here at services, or email them to the church office. Here in the background, we have the set for the Christmas play that the First Presbyterian Church of Farmington Hills players did just a wonderful job performing today for services. And thank you again for all your hard work on that. Okay, Bruce, we're going to jump into questions.
All righty.
It's the Christmas season, so let's talk about Advent. Begin by saying a few words about how Advent started.
I don't know its origins, but Advent is the season, the 4 weeks prior to Christmas, the 4 Sundays, comes from the Latin, meaning it's coming or it's on the way. So it's the season of preparation, the season of awaiting and hoping. Theologically, we call this the season of the already, not yet. So Advent prepares us to celebrate what has already happened, which is the birth of Jesus. And Advent also prepares us for the not yet part of the season, which is Jesus has not yet returned as he promises in the Gospels and as the New Testament attests to that he will come again. So already, he's been here, we're going to celebrate, and maybe this is the year that Jesus returns, maybe not, who knows. But that's the dynamic, or really what Advent is all about, preparing us, us having this expectation to celebrate and await at the same time.
When I was a child raised in the Catholic Church, Advent was a really big deal, and there was a separate Mass every Sunday, different vestments for the priest or priests, and I can remember mostly being, gosh, can we just get this over with so we can get to Christmas, you know? But it was an interesting way to kind of count it down. Do all Christian churches have the same kind of Advent celebrations or traditions?
That I don't know, but on the church calendar, the first Sunday in Advent is New Year's Day on the church calendar. That's when the church year begins again. So there is a different color of that season. There is a different time for that season. And it's always the 4 Sundays preceding Christmas Day. I would think most mainline Protestant churches and maybe many of the non-denominationals celebrate Advent. But I was like that too as a child. I thought, come on already, let's get to the day. However, the church I grew up in, I'm not conscious of us, in the worship service doing Advent, but my family, we had this Advent devotional, and every day we'd flip something up, and there was the text, and then we'd read that after dinner. So in a way, that formed me, even though I was completely unaware of it, because I was too busy focusing on, hey, am I finally going to get that train set I want for Christmas, which I never did.
Well, that's a good segue into talking about Advent calendars. When I was a kid, we frequently had Advent calendars where every day you would open a little door and there'd be a piece of chocolate. Well, my brothers and sisters and I, we gobbled the chocolates down in a couple of days, so there wasn't much use in opening the doors after that. But it leads into a question about how Advent has become so secularized. I was in Trader Joe's a couple weeks ago, and with all due respect to dog owners out there, this really annoyed me. There was an Advent calendar for dogs. Every day you'd open a little door and there'd be a doggy treat in there. So it seems like so many of the Advent calendars are completely divorced and removed from the season itself. Any thoughts about how that happened or what that means?
I don't know how it happened, but it's not surprising in our culture. If someone can turn a buck on something, anything, they will. And they found a way to do it.
Well,
it doesn't surprise me at all.
In the work world, I was steeped in free enterprise and
Yes.
small business, so I respect that.
Yeah.
But still, I just personally find it a little disconcerting,
Yeah.
and it certainly spills over into the Christmas season as a whole, which I think maybe makes it all the more significant that churches like the First Presbyterian do return the holiness and the sacredness of the holiday season.
We do celebrate the Advent season. And with regard to the dog calendar for Advent, a lot of stores, as you know, already are setting up Christmas decorations pretty much the day after Halloween. Radio stations, as you know, are playing Christmas music 24/7 by the middle of November. It's not surprising.
There's a movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven, so who are we to say that? Dogs don't deserve to have their Advent treats. Moving on to a different topic, I'm going to sort of read the whole question. This was submitted by one of our viewers. Asking about, in the Old Testament, predictions for punishment to people who stray to other idols, but also restoration. How will that happen? Throughout the Gospels, it says via Jesus himself and the disciples that Jesus will return, Jesus will come again. What does that mean? Will he pop up somewhere in the middle of sinfulness or great things? Or all these people that have followed him diligently, will they immediately die and be with God? I've never seen or heard how this will happen and what it will look like. It's very confusing. So a lot of stuff to unpack in that question, but I present that to you for your thoughts.
So I'm going to start at the end first. In the end, I'm hearing the question, what happens when we die? And we don't know exactly, except to say that we're not separated from the love of God and Jesus, that God never abandons us, and that death has been swallowed up. It's no more. And we also believe that at some point we are resurrected to new and eternal life, bodily life, as in the same way Jesus was raised from the dead and was a glorified body. We're not just going to be spirits, but we'll be glorified flesh and blood. The other questions in there about, let's see, what was the second part? I've forgotten.
So the second part deals with, will people, with the coming, the second coming
Jesus
of Christ.
coming.
Right. When will he return? What does that mean? Will he just pop up? Will we all immediately die? Will there a rapture? I know there's a lot of different scenarios.
Well, rapture is unbiblical. That's something that came about in the 19th century, so there's no biblical or theological foundation for that. But the scriptures attest to the fact, Jesus himself says, I will come again, but you don't know when. And basically, Jesus says, don't spend any time trying to predict it or figure it out, but I will show up again. And the good news is when Jesus shows up again, it's to restore and to redeem and renew and make all things new. And the better news is, as Jesus comes back, whenever he comes back, making all things new, then Jesus stays with us here, and this becomes our, if you will, heavenly home. This becomes creation as it was supposed to be before Adam and Eve's disobedience, and it's restoration back to that. And we live in that kingdom, that world, if you will, with Jesus for all time. The beginning, the Old Testament. So you have to keep in mind, these are the scriptures that Jesus read. These are the scriptures that all the authors of the New Testament read. They're not Old Testament, New Testament, but that was their Bible. Yeah, there are many times that God punishes Israel for either the northern or the southern kingdom. They're both punished and they're both exiled for disobedience, primarily for oppression, for injustice. You know, they didn't tend to the poor, they didn't take care of the widow or the orphan. They looked to other idols, whether it was a physical idol made of something, or an idol like we have all in our culture, you know, like sports is an idol here. Anything can be an idol if it's something that one spends more time devoting their attention to than to God. So there was idolatry there, and God sends prophets who speak for God to the people, and the prophets say, get it together, and there are times when the prophets say, because you didn't, you're going to be exiled. The northern kingdom was exiled into Assyria. The southern kingdom was exiled into Babylon. However, exile is not the final word for God. The final word for God is redemption and return, coming home. So the people in Babylon, they came home again. And in a way, that's the life of the Christian. We're in exile, so to speak. We live in the world, not of it. We're awaiting for Jesus, who will return to restore it And when it's all restored, then this will be our home from our previous time of exile, if that makes sense.
I remember reading that the great thing about Jesus and God sweeping away paganism and idols is it really paved the way for the westernization of the world, for science. It's instead of some unpredictable house god that you may or may not be able to placate, God says, I created the world, I love you, go forth and understand my creation. And leads into something we've discussed often on our show about when trying to conceptualize what it means when Jesus returns. Again, we're getting into the realm of poetry. We're trying to put into words, and especially in our scientific and materialistic world, how do you help people understand the ineffable, the indescribable?
Right.
And you certainly help do a good job with that with your sermons every Sunday.
Yeah. Right. You can't. You say, for example, in English, I'm really in love with this person. How do we describe that? We say we're falling in love. Well, we're not really falling, but that's our best attempt of saying I'm in love with somebody. And poets, musicians, artists, they're the masters of writing or painting or composing what that feels like to be in love. It's not the thing itself, but it's a representation of it, and it invites us to be a part of it. And the same thing about the Jesus story. You know, you can't really explain all of it completely, but you're invited to be a part of it, and that's the glory of it.
Next question. Does the old Presbyterian statement, we believe in predestination, have any significance? If it's true, then why bother with goodness and mercy? Does it mean that each of us is predestined to do good things or bad things, and we have no control?
I really wish John Calvin had never written about predestination. Amazingly, he wrote very little about it, but that's what he's most remembered for. I think it's important first to recognize that predestination and fatalism are not the same thing, but I think many people confuse the two, that predestination is fatalism. Fatalism being everything's fated, so I have no choice. I'm basically an automaton, and God has pre-wired me to whatever I do, I had no control over it. And that's not what predestination is. Predestination at its core simply means that God has called us. That's what the church is, ecclesia, the called out ones, the ones who have been called out. We're not better than, we're set aside for a specific purpose. That's what a saint is. A saint is someone who's called by God and set aside to love God, love neighbor, and love yourself. Predestination is, if you want, the vehicle that God uses to call us out. It's, in other words, predestination is God calling us, you and me, people who are in Christ, to be the body. The big emphasis really is that it's not up to the human being, it's up to the goodness and the grace and the kindness of God. Maybe that's the most important thing. And the other thing being that predestination is not fatalism. Of course you have a choice whether you come to a stop sign and say, I don't want to go home, I want to stop here and get an ice cream cone. You know, or of course you have a choice. I don't want to watch the Lions, I'd rather watch the Vikings. That's blasphemy, by the way, but you know the point. So there is choice, but the choice for us to choose God, that comes from God's grace. God initiates, and God even gives us the grace to be able to respond to say, yes, I'll follow.
In the tech world of Silicon Valley, where my daughter and her family live, there's a theme of conceptualizing something called the multiverse. Ooh. And it's part of modern physics trying to reconcile some physics stuff that we don't need to try to get into that I don't understand anyway. But it's still, it's very similar to the idea, I think, of predestination, that because of the multiverse, all things are possible. In some universe, that's not this one. Some version of Bruce is still a DJ instead of becoming a pastor.
Cool,
so,
I like it.
Yeah, so it's still echoing through modern culture, even if it doesn't have specifically a reference back to John Calvin.
Yeah, well, even Calvin owes his predestination to Augustine, and Augustine owes it to Paul. So It's not an original Calvin idea, but Calvin wrote on it and anyway, that's enough.
I'm going to read another question that was emailed to me and then get your reaction. So I'm sure you've been exposed to several churches in transition, and I've heard
Yes.
lots of suggestions on how churches respond to the need for growth, increasing their membership or evangelism. I know these all sound crass when we should be talking about turning people to Christ in his teachings, but it is about marketing at some level. Most mainline churches have this issue. What ideas and solutions have you heard?
The number one for me, not just as a transitional or an interim pastor, is the best way to have folks come to your congregation, whether it's a Sunday service, whether it's an event on a Wednesday night meal, whatever it is, nothing is better than the person who belongs to that community inviting other people. There is nothing more effective, there is nothing more human than someone saying to another person, hey, I'd really like to have you come to worship with me on Sunday, or I'd really like you to, hey, why don't you come and join the choir for 4 or 5 weeks? If it's not your cup of tea, no big deal. Hey, we're having a men's breakfast. The ladies are getting together to do this. Come and join us. That, if you look at it in the Bible, what does Jesus do? Jesus is constantly inviting people to follow, and that's the key for me. That's the key methodology of having people get involved in the life of a congregation, and for the people who are involved to continue to do the invitational work of asking other people to come and be.
That really resonates because most people will be very daunted at the idea of how do I increase Christian participation in the whole United States.
Right.
Well, invite somebody to your men's breakfast or
Exactly.
visit a shut-in.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something.
Yeah.
Something on the individual personal
Exactly.
level.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a worship service. It could be an event that's part of the church, and just say, hey, or invite them to come to X number of meetings and check it out, and don't put any guilt on them, and just say, hey, if you want to be a part of this, cool. But if it's not your deal, it's all right. No shame.
Those are the questions I have for this month, and we're about at the end of our time for this program. To close, is there anything that you would like to add, or any questions you've had rolling around that you've got answers for that you want to share?
Well, I have lots of my own questions, but I don't have any answers. No, not really, but I enjoy this.
Yeah, very good. Well, I hope our listeners enjoy it too. Well, that's it. Bruce, thanks again very much, and thanks to all of you for watching our show, Go Ahead and Ask. You can find the past shows by going to our First Presbyterian Church of Farmington website, clicking on the Watch and Demand videos, and by navigating to our YouTube page. Submit questions on the YouTube page, hand them to me or Bruce, or email them to the church office. My name is Michael Rogers. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next month.